Thank you, Chair Griffin, members of the board, Superintendent Hamlet, Cabinet, and certainly the Chapel Hill Carrboro community. I'm happy to present the second of 4 updates concerning the high school schedule implementation. I'll remind the board and our community that we will provide quarterly updates to the full board concerning implementation of our new high school schedule, with more frequent updates to occur at our Student Success Committee meetings, which occur, I think, the last Tuesday of every month. But tonight's update is perhaps the most comprehensive update information-wise that we'll be able to give to date. We fully anticipate that all subsequent updates will also be pretty information-heavy because we are in the throes of implementing our new schedule. But tonight, Dr. Bells will kick us off by reviewing professional development opportunities available to our teachers in the coming weeks and months. He'll also review some of our pacing guide examples. I'll take us through a number of decision points we were able to make as an administration. Then I'll turn it over to Dr. Bells to talk about course registration process this year, as well as our community roundtable structure for parents and students. And then I'll close us out talking about and giving a status update around the North Carolina Student Information System. So I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Bells, and he's going to kick us off, and then I'll see you in a bit.
All right, thank you all for taking the time to have a lot of significant updates we had. So we spent a lot of time going through just getting feedback from multiple stakeholders, whether that be our 4x4 committee. Dr. Trice will talk a little bit more about who that kind of consists of. Going into schools, getting feedback, just having individual conversations with teachers, administrators, parents. And a lot of the feedback that we gained in terms of looking at our professional development was going back and looking at when this professional development would happen. At the beginning of the year, last year, we had shared that we might start up then, but our teachers really shared that they wanted to get the beginning of the school year going, and then really spend the semester focusing on our decision points so they knew exactly what they were going to be, the course would look like, and then also knowing, after we're able to make some of those pacing adjustments to be able to talk through what that may look like. So we really focused on that for the first semester, looking at kind of rolling out our professional development the second semester, just based on a lot of the feedback that we had. Looking at some of the professional development that we shared before, our in-person PD, we'll talk a little more about that, but we talked about making sure that we had a robust options for our staff, but making sure that they weren't necessarily something that was required for all staff. In talking with our numerous teachers, administrators, a lot of people, when I say a lot, I would say pretty much anybody who has experience outside of Chapel Hill, Carrboro City Schools has experience with the block schedule. So when they're going into this, something that they've experienced, whether it be on a 4x4, an AB, something of that nature, some of the things that they've asked is we could actually share some of that with our colleagues. So that's when we get down to the PLC time that, that's what we'll talk about there too. We also got some feedback to make sure that we're offering it during the day. As we know, our high schools end later in the day, and then there's a lot of other engagements that our teachers are involved in when it comes to clubs and athletics and all that stuff. And if we want to really dive into the work, trying to do something at the end of the day probably isn't the best time to dive into that. Another big feedback piece we had is making sure that we're repeating the same PD next year when they're actually in the throes of a new schedule. It's a lot easier to learn something today, go back tomorrow and actually implement it in your classroom, whereas we're still on the same schedule that we're navigating this year. And then the last piece here was just over the course of the last few weeks, each of our schools has worked with ALP, which is Advanced Learning Partners, and they spent a half day. And they met with principals, met with coaches, counseling teacher leads within their buildings, and they were able to actually come up with an implementation guidebook. So it's about, I'd say 12 to 15 pages of best practice, sample schedules, different PD options that they're able to utilize within their buildings themselves. Our asynchronous PD that we had talked about previously is still getting ready to unrail it. So we've got our self-paced PD through Branching Minds, so that will kind of roll out. We're actually meeting with them tomorrow to make sure we're rostering everybody correctly so that our teachers are able to navigate that. But like I said at the very beginning, they really want that dedicated PLC time to be able to talk through what does this actually look and feel like in my content. So we've talked with building leaders to make sure that that is going to be ongoing. If we look at this as a whole, so if you're a teacher, we're looking at a full day of professional development, which is February 10th. We're kind of using that as our kickoff. There's between 8 and 12 hours minimum worth of modules through Branching Minds that are all related back to our 4x4 schedule, and then 3 hours of rolling PD that I'll share as we go through. Keep in mind that that's for this year. As we're moving on to next year, we anticipate that, every year we have our teaching and learning conference that would truly be dedicated to okay, here's your content, what exactly are we doing, and getting into that as we come back in August. In addition to that, our monthly department meetings, for PLCs, always have a 4x4 approach, but we're going to really ramp that up as we move forward. Our academic coaches are already planning. Actually, they spent the entire day at Cheryl Mar today, planning for district PLC PD in the buildings, knowing that each of our buildings need something a little different. Chapel Hill High needs something different than Carrboro and East. And those coaches are able to give some of that feedback as to what that looks like. And then for our school-based professional development, again, making sure that we have that protected PLT time for staff to actually talk about the shifts to 4x4 and really making sure that we have that time designated in the schedule. So this is kind of an outline of what our professional development plans look like from the district level, looking at kind of that January and February months are kind of your nuts and bolts. What does the schedule actually look like? So we've got some rolling PD that we'll be doing within the buildings. And like we talked about too, that February 10th date, making sure that we have some in-person PD that is going to be either done as a whole school or as different departments or small groups. And then be able to make sure that after they have that learning in the morning, they have the afternoon to go back into their PLTs and talk about what does that look and feel like for my content. In March and April, the Branching Minds asynchronous piece is still going through and, talking about differentiation strategies, leveraging that extended time. As we talked about last spring, a lot of the benefits of the block schedule are actually being able to utilize that longer time. And those asynchronous modules will be able to help us with that. On the left side, we've got Avid and Elevation rolling PD. These are things that our teachers should be somewhat familiar with, but it's allowing them to say, okay, when I'm going in and I'm looking at the content chunking and the chunking during my class periods, what can I actually do for longer periods of time as we're navigating that? So again, our rolling PD, that January, February piece, we talked about that. The rolling PD is really looking at those content blocks, it's accessing prior knowledge, direct instruction, small groups, etc. And then really being able to say, when we look at each of those pieces, how do we kind of take those and chunk them together to meet those 80 minutes? And I'll show that on the next slide, what that kind of looks like. That February workday, we talked about sharing strategies to divide up that longer block to focus on, to move towards more of a learning from the teaching that is going on. Discussing the routines and the practices, I will be honest, the experience that teachers need are the routines that they're actually going to learn when they go in and do it for 80 minutes. They're going to figure out one day I planned this and I planned for 175 minutes and it was way too much. The next day they're going to come in, I planned for only 55 minutes. It's that balancing act to figure out what actually works. So that piece is going to be beneficial during that February workday and trying to figure out what that looks like. So this is kind of a breakdown. These are just pieces straight out of our Branching Minds of looking at how would we actually break down an 80-minute instructional block. So we have a classic, a workshop, and then a couple different structured learning. And there are thousands of these for us to actually go in and look at. This is not, it's really what am I going to do tomorrow? So this is just an example of what our teachers will look at and they'll be able to navigate. Some teachers may say, I really want to focus on 2 of these and get really good at doing 2 of these. Others may say, like, every single day I want to do something different. But if you're able to navigate each of those content blocks, you'll be able to navigate pieces that will be beneficial for our students moving forward. Our pacing guides. So like we shared, we've spent a lot of time over this first semester going back and looking at our pacing guides. I will say that our instructional planning teams have spent multiple days. There's been lots of times where we see lots of people in Cheryl Mar, they get together, be able to talk through what those adjustments looks like. I think for some people, that was a little cumbersome, so they've asked, kind of some of our department leads kind of lead the work on that, and then they'll give us some feedback, so we've been able to start doing some of that with our world language. And I just want to reiterate that this isn't just going in and looking at, okay, here's 2 days worth of work, how do I put it into one day? It's not an equal 2-for-1 change. If we look at a traditional classroom period, you have an anticipatory set or a warm-up, and you go into those. So if we're taking 2 of those classes, we don't need 2 warm-ups, we don't need 2 exit tickets, so it allows us to actually gain some time back and give that back to the instructional content time. Also knowing as we go through next year, we're going to be making modifications throughout the year as we see fit. This is, continued work from our audits that asked us to actually go through and look at that anyway. So this has given us that opportunity to do so. So this is just a quick example of our Math 1. So on the top is our Math 1 pacing guide next year for our middle school. So that's on a traditional schedule. You'll see that that's 18 days long. On the bottom is the first semester for our block schedule. You see that that's 8 days. So again, we were able to not just take 18 divided by 2, get 9, but we were able to navigate that into 8 different days, which actually allows us to gain some time back. And we didn't lose anything in that process. The same instructional materials are taking place, same things are being taught. It's just the fact that we have a longer arc to be able to teach within that class period. So it's just an example of one of them. A lot of our blocks match up, and it gives us a couple of days back, which allows us to navigate that time period. And I will hand it over to Dr. Trice.
So I know the board is aware that the administration had to make a number of important decision points concerning implementation, the structure and function of the high school schedule. And I just wanted to take a moment to go through some of those. But first, I'd like to acknowledge that none of the decision points were made in isolation. We used a shared decision-making process to arrive at these decisions. And I want to extend my gratitude to the 4x4 committee, which is a group of primarily school-based educators who came together to provide advice and guidance to the administration and school leadership as we structure our new schedule. They were instrumental in helping us determine what needs to be standardized across schools, how we would use our flex period to support students. But I think probably most importantly, just the guidance and encouragement to build a schedule that is focused and that doesn't really cater to in every individual unique need that comes up, but really to strike a balance between flexibility for students in terms of creating options and having a schedule that is practical that we can actually implement. So again, very instrumental. But among the most important decision points is the bell schedule. I mean, that's the thing that everyone wants to see. I'm going to use the next slide to kind of talk through these talking points. I think it's just easier to see, especially for those who may be new to this conversation. So the bell schedule is built around 4 80-minute instructional blocks, as you can see on the screen. The only back-to-back instructional blocks that we have in the bell schedule was first block and second block. You'll notice after second block, we were able to maintain the 45-minute lunch period. That's the thing our students requested most, and so I know they'll be happy to see that. You'll also notice after third block, we've incorporated a 40-minute flex period. Now, the flex period was strategically placed at this time to accommodate travel. We have a number of students taking courses at different schools. They'll be able to use this flex time to travel to do their cross-district courses. The board may remember as well, during the high school schedule assessment, one of the primary concerns that came up was concerning CTE courses that have an associated accreditation. There's a required number of seat hours. We were able to share our proposed bell schedule with North Carolina Department of Public Instruction. They agree that with the strategic use of our flex time, that we would be able to accommodate those required hours for courses that have an associated accreditation. And in fact, they share that many high schools that have many more course offerings with an associated accreditation use this exact same strategy and exact same schedule that we're using today. So we feel really good about that. Another big decision point was around AP courses, with the exception of a number of AP science courses with an associated lab. All AP courses will roll out on a semester basis. High school science courses with an associated lab will take on a year-long course framework using the A-Day, B-Day format during the year-long course. Now, I know that there's some questions in our community, particularly from students who are signing up for science courses that have a lab associated with it, whether or not it would take up half of their course load in any particular semester. That will not be the case, obviously, because we're looking to schedule those on AP courses with a lab on a year-long schedule. So I just wanted to be clear about that. We are committed to also pairing courses. The board may remember when we were speaking with our regional partners during the assessment, that's a strategy where they will line up or pair non-AP courses with AP courses to, one, deepen the learning of or extend the learning of the AP course, but deepen the learning of the non-AP course. And I think I used the example of some of our regional partners pairing honors biology with AP biology, knowing that many of those honor students would go into AP, and teachers were front-loading some of the AP course content in the honors course without disrupting the scope and sequence of the honors course. And we're fully committed to deploying that strategy as well to the greatest extent possible. I'll say this, that we'll learn a lot more when students start to sign up for courses, and we can begin to kind of see which of those courses we can pair. I think it's great that the College Board has published a document that kind of gives school districts guidance on which courses to pair as well. We are also committed to the greatest extent possible looking at our AP courses that have low enrollment or that might be singletons and scheduling those at the same time, perhaps in the fourth block that would accommodate student travel. That will give us an opportunity to bolster some of those low enrolled courses or singletons, but it might also provide an opportunity for us to leverage technology if there are other low enrolled courses or singletons that are offered during blocks other than the fourth block. And so, again, in the next month or so, we'll learn a lot about where our students are signing up, and what strategies we can leverage to address some of our AP concerns. In terms of arts courses, all arts courses will run on a semester basis. Students will have the opportunity of enrolling in an arts course each of the semesters throughout their high school career, or maybe they want to take one arts course per year. They will have that flexibility. We'll, again, continue to look at course enrollment patterns next year, and if we have to revisit that in 26, 27, we will. But this is the maximum flexibility that we would have, especially for our arts courses, and that's what we'll pursue. World language courses will also be run on a semester basis. Students will not have the opportunity to progress through their course sequence in consecutive semesters, primarily due to some of the enrollment trends we see at the upper levels of our world language courses. But students may have the opportunity to kind of request placement in a sequential course after the master schedule is built. But that would depend on whether there's room in a course. But what we're agreeing to is students will have an opportunity to take one world language course in their progression each year. AVID courses will be a bit unique. We're looking to schedule AVID courses with 9th and 10th grade required courses, which means that they will occur or operate on a year-long basis using the A-Day B-Day format. We've given schools some flexibility in terms of which courses Avid might partner with, but the idea is that Avid will meet all year, partner with a required 9th or 10th grade course, and that's a bit of the flexibility we're looking to kind of build in the schedule. The long-term goal of eventually pairing Avid courses with AP courses or Avid courses with Durham Tech courses to ensure that each of our Avid students graduates with college credit, either via the AP pathway or, a school like Durham Tech or some other opportunity. There's also a commitment to really think critically about how we schedule Tier 3 support courses. And for those who may not know, our Tier 3 support courses are put in place to support students who have significant gaps in terms of grade level expectation in reading and or math. We're looking to pair our Tier 3 courses with the academic course that they support. This is a big point for us, and I'll show you why right now. One of our Tier 3 courses is Foundations of Math for students who who are kind of behind grade level expectations. But pairing foundations with math, for instance, with Math 1, would provide opportunities to spend an entire semester really getting the prerequisite skills to be successful in Math 1 before they actually get into Math 1. So under the 4x4, the first semester, students could take Foundations of Math. The second semester, they could take Math 1, and there is a seamless transition. Some of what we see now in our current schedule is some of our most students who are most in need are taking Foundations of Math and Math 1 at the very same time. I mean, it's better than nothing in terms of having support, but it's certainly not the most efficient thing that we can do for students. So this is an area that we're really looking forward to. I want to also provide a point of clarity around EC services. So students who are receiving EC services in the general education setting under the new 4x4 format will get their services exactly as they do now. And likewise, if students are receiving services in a special education setting through the academic strategies or learning lab, they will get the services in the exact same way under the new 4x4. I know that was an issue that came up, but the schedule does not dictate the services for the students. And I just wanted to provide a point of clarity around that. I am going to turn it over to Dr. Bales, who will talk about course registration process. I know this is what students and parents want to hear about.
All right, so we have a timeline for you. So last Friday, I missed dismissing early. We had a long morning meeting to discuss our district registration process with principals, counselors, data managers, basically anyone that is on a scheduling team. Upcoming, we have our high school registration information night, which is on January 28th, which leads into our registration timeline, which is January 29th to February 14th is when the window opens. So students will enter selections into PowerSchool. And just a point of clarity, our students, when they register, are registering for the entire year. Students don't register on a semester basis. So you don't get to say, like, I want this class this semester. When you register, you say, these are the classes I want for the upcoming year. During that time frame, our master schedule skeleton is built in PowerSchool. That skeleton is the overall plan in which classes are taught and when. It's not necessarily the entire schedule. And one of the things that I've realized recently is, when we say master schedule, I'm not sure that everyone understands what that means. Talking with lots of parents, they were under the impression that we already have a schedule created and kids just kind of sign up for the courses we have. We know we're going to have 4 math classes and they just sign up for it. So when students sign up for schedules, they request what they would like to have, and then we build an entire schedule around that. At the university level, they'll tell you, we got 4 classes, and when they're filled, they're full. That's not what we do. We really try to make sure that we're giving students what they need to graduate, and a lot of what they would want for when we're looking at their post-secondary plan. So I just want to make sure that we had that point of clarification. So that master schedule skeleton has actually moved up quite a bit in the fact that we're moving to Infinite Campus, and we have to have that in place so that we're able to navigate. So again, as we know, PowerSchool will sunset in July as our school information system, and then Infinite Campus will will go live sometime in July. So at that point, kind of where we land is schedules are reviewed and revised by the administration, and then the 12-month counselor that is available at that time. So this is the screen. It's a screen that students have registered for any high school courses ever in PowerSchool. This is what it looks like. We're still registering PowerSchool. Students will select core classes and elective course options, just like they've done in the past with alternates, because we know not all requests are able to be accommodated. So for our students, for our parents, we'll know the screens will look exactly the same as that they did last year when we registered. I will say with this too, like as we're building this registration process in a new system, this is what I've been sharing with some families as we've communicated recently. I've likened it to like going to a buffet. So when you go to a buffet, you're going to take one plate, and you go up to the buffet and you get everything that you need. You don't go through 2 plates. We look at those people take 2 plates, but we're only going up with 1 plate, and you get what you need, and then you come back. And so the difference this year is by the time that we have every single person go through the line and every person gets what they need, we have this opportunity now for students to go back after the fact. You're not going to say, I need 2 Spanishes first. You're going to say after the fact, okay, if I've got Spanish 1 first semester and there's a spot in Spanish 2, can I have it? Now, that Spanish 2 spot may be there, it may not be there. Just like when you go up to your buffet, like your favorite dessert may be there, may not be there. But you get that option this year. In years past, we never had students taking Spanish 1 and Spanish 2 in the same year. So this is the opportunity that could happen, but it's not guaranteed that extra helping of Spanish is going to be there waiting for you. So I just think it's been helpful for me, sharing that with some of our parents. I just want to make sure we shared that. Our school counselors, as we're going through this, our counselors do annual transcript audits. They visit classrooms, talk about the registration process. And what's kind of unique about our district is that every single one of our students has an advising session to talk about what they're looking at for the upcoming year. That's not something that happens in every single district. So that happens, we visit middle schools, we meet with all the rising 9th grade. Behind the scenes, just a reminder that all of our counselors are under contract until July 1st. That's, after that point, the RIF does take place. So we feel fairly confident that our counselors are able to get all of our kids registered, have them, have those conversations. They're taking part in master scheduling teams. They're looking at intentional scheduling for those off-cohort students, and then making sure that they're preparing for that transition. I just also wanted to add, Ms. Beeman, who is our liaison through Durham Tech, has regularly scheduled information sessions for people to attend. Sometimes she's on there and no one shows up, so she knows that. So she is very accommodating. If you reach out to her, she's able to have individual conversations. But her job is to be the liaison for Durham Tech for our high schools. That's her full-time job. So, she is more than willing to have conversations. She's actually at our high schools all the time. She has, thankful to East, they gave her a space, which means she's at East a lot. But if that's someone that we want to reach out to, that's definitely someone to be in contact with. Our last piece here, community roundtables, which we kind of renamed community Q&A sessions. So if you see them, they kind of are the same thing here. So those Q&A sessions are, to make sure that we're providing guidance for our students and families on course selection, scheduling, graduation pathways, and everything else related to 4x4. I will tell parents and you as a board as well, we're going to be gathering questions. That's actually going to go out in principal Sunday messages. We're going to be gathering questions from our parents to hopefully get an FAQ that's sent out before registration even happens, so that we can answer a lot of those questions that may come up there, or at least refer people back to the FAQ. We want to make sure that we're answering the exact questions that our parents have. So if after that FAQ, if there's still particular questions, schools are already, and I think they're going to share, hopefully, I think this week in their Sunday message, or if not, very soon, when those times will be at each of our individual schools. But that gives you an opportunity to, talk to administrators, possibly counselors, to address some of those specific questions that you may have. It's flexible. It's really just come in. What questions do you have? This isn't necessarily a discussion on like the yes or no of it. We're moving forward with the 4x4, but like, what do you need for this? We're also doing this to make sure that when we have our district registration nights and elective fairs, that we get to allow our teachers to focus on their content and not have them come like, well, what does this look like on a 4x4? So when you come to elective nights, as parents, we just ask that there will be a QR code in every single room. Scan that QR code, submit your questions. We'll make sure we get them answered for you. But we want you to make sure that you're getting information on the content for those classes. Again, as we said, that community Q&A sessions are going to coincide with our registration window, which is January 29th to February 14th, to make sure that we're providing that support. So be on the lookout for those questions.
So the administration is committed to sharing with the board any implementation risks that we've identified with the schedule implementation. The only risk that we've been able to identify to date is concerning the North Carolina Student Information System. I'll remind our board and the community, this is a system that was implemented this year to manage our student data. It'll replace PowerSchool. There are two cohorts that districts could sign up for. Cohort 1 implementation is this year. Cohort 2's implementation of the new student information system is next year. And the Chapel Hill Carrboro City Schools is a part of the second cohort. So while we are implementing our new schedule, we're also moving to a new student information system. We've been told that it'll provide enhanced functionality, and some of our cohort 1 schools have certainly confirmed that in terms of managing grades and attendance and that type of thing. But I wanted to put the board on notice that at your February 6th meeting, representatives from the North Carolina Department of Public Instruction, who oversee implementation, the statewide implementation of NC-SIS, will be here to present and share some of the learnings of the statewide implementation. You'll also receive an update on how the implementation is going in Chapel Hill. But to date, we don't see any issues with our implementation of the North Carolina Student Information System or any risks associated to moving forward with our high school schedule. Again, we told you that we would share that information with you during our updates. I want to remind and encourage our community members to continue to follow the updates that we bring to the board and at the Student Success Committee meetings. But for those who are kind of interested in the day-to-day details of kind of how we're rolling out the new high school schedule, we have our implementation dashboard. If you click on the academics tab at the top of our screen, and this may have changed because our website has changed, but it'll be under high school schedule assessment, the implementation dashboard. And with that, Mr. Chair, I'll turn it back over to the board and we'll be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Dr. Trice and Dr. Bales. Board members, questions, comments? Yeah, go ahead, Meredith.
Thanks very much for the update, both of you. I just had a couple of questions. One, these go into a little more specifics, like the questions that I've heard from the community. I heard you address the continuity challenge with foreign language and math. Are there specific things that you're going to be letting the community know that we're going to be doing to help kids as they, maybe have a gap between math courses of a semester, to make sure that they get caught up and that they are reminded of the skills that they learned in the previous years? And I think that that's just one example. It also would apply to things like AP tests and things like that. Are we going to do flex time review sessions and things like that? And maybe those specifics are things we're going to talk about after the registration period occurs, but I know it's top of mind for a lot of families, so I just wanted to see if you could at least...
Sure, I think you're exactly right. During the assessment, we worked closely with some of our regional partners who had more experience in this implementation of the 4x4, and they would get creative using flex time in terms of review sessions. Sometimes there was a 0 period, or Saturday academies. I mean, there were a whole range of strategies that were used to help students kind of navigate. We also are very much tied to the work that we do with MTSS, where we assess students kind of where they are constantly. And for those who have significant gaps, we are putting in place Tier 3 courses that will allow them to kind of hone their skills over the course of a year. We don't have that, for instance, for Math 2 because our data doesn't yet suggest that we need it. But if we do need foundations of Math 2, that's something we're certainly willing to put in place. With respect to math, I think, earlier, it was last week during our course registration meeting, the topic of math progression came up, and we're certainly looking at for any math course beyond Math 3, students can enroll in a math elective as they see fit. Our new schedule allows for that, but Math 1 and 2, or really Math 2, because Math 1 can come with a foundations course. Really, Math 2 is kind of where there isn't, an option to accelerate, but making sure that we have an understanding on where students are. After Math 3, students can kind of pick and choose what they want in terms of their math progression. And it all depends on what course selection looks like. To your point, we'll learn a lot more once we actually have student data.
Thank you.
Can I add real quick?
Yeah.
So I just want to introduce my team back here, because a lot of them have been doing a lot of that behind the scenes work. So when we talk about world language, our world language director, has conversations with surrounding counties to ask, like, what, you're doing this, what continuity concerns have you, been able to address? And some of those have been, making sure that, some courses may be partners. So it might be like, okay, you take Spanish 1, we really look at is a semester 2 course, and Spanish 3 is that subsequent year. So the only gap that you really have is that summer. With AP, our director is working with our AP, I won't say director, but liaison, who's able to come in and talk about pacing and how does that actually work on a block schedule. We'll have some of our Flex Wednesdays for our staff members to go in and actually navigate what it looks like on a block. So we're not the first district to do it. That information has been shared. So each one of our departments has met with either surrounding people or different people that are able to navigate and share what each of those progressions would look like.
If I could just take an opportunity, if board members are okay with this, these two gentlemen have done a tremendous amount of work, and they are really, really bright and smart. They don't do this work alone. So if it's okay with you, I would love for our instructional services team and high school principals who are here to stand up, introduce themselves in the areas that they're responsible for, because this has been a tremendous and heavy lift that has been facilitated by the majority of the people in this room.
That sounds great.
Okay. Sorry to put y'all on the spot, but come on. Principals and instructional services, please.
I'm Jonathan Hamill, and I'm the arts coordinator.
Michael Woods, Director of CTE.
Nicole Walker, Director of MTSS and Academic Programming.
Rebecca Atkins, Director of School Counseling and Learning Supports.
Valerie Seller, Science Coach.
Scarlett Steinert, Helpful Living, Athletics and Driver's Ed.
Helen Atkins, Dual Language, World Language, and Multilingual Learners.
Kate Kennedy, Advanced Learning, Student Leadership, and AVID.
Helena Thomas, Principal of Carrboro High School.
John Dixon, Principal, Phoenix Academy. Thank you.
Jesse Casey, East Chapel Hill High School.
Steve Sullivan, principal of the Chapel Hill High School.
Thank you all.
I had a couple others, if that's okay. Where I attended a SIT meeting last week at one of the high schools, and there were several students in attendance who had a lot of good questions. And one approached me afterwards and had a very specific question. And I said, well, I don't know the answer, but I certainly will pose it to the powers that be and see if they can at least give you who you should talk to about these kinds of specific things. Her question was that she's on student government, and at this particular high school, they have a class for student government. And so she wanted to know whether that was going to be able to continue or not. And I said, I don't know, but I don't know how that works typically. But so should I tell her to talk to her high school folks about that, her counselor?
Yeah, or, you can direct her to Dr. Bells or myself. I think, we're able to kind of run that down. So when we have a curriculum, the course is supposed to be offered at all schools. And so we'd want to, check in with that. But I don't know that I could answer that right now.
Okay, it might apply to things like yearbook or, newspaper, things like that is what I was envisioning. And then the last thing I wanted to ask, could you elaborate a little bit more on Durham Tech? Because one thing that came up in the SIT meeting that I realized there was a lot of confusion on is how do we expect the students to access those courses? Is it going to be most primarily online? If there's an in-person component, are the students expected to drive themselves or, arrange their own transportation? I think there was a lot of gaps in the information that's out in the wild about that.
Yeah, I think it's a little bit of, all of that. I think many of the courses are online, and we do provide space for students to take online courses in our high schools. We have students that are enrolled in CCP courses, not just in Durham Tech, but, UNC Chapel Hill and other universities where they may drive themselves there. But and we do have, I believe, some courses that are offered in our high schools. And so we certainly want to continue to kind of grow the offerings. I know Durham Tech is kind of waiting on us to kind of adopt a schedule that is more conducive to aligning and partnering. But we would love to see more courses taught on our campuses, but that would involve kind of ramping up the number of students that are involved in a cohort, and then we can begin to kind of petition Durham Tech to send their resources to Chapel Hill Carrboro, and they're willing to do so. I mean, they've been kind of very forthright in that way.
Thank you. And just the last thing I just remembered too, that one parent expressed an interest in hoping that they would get the schedules a little earlier in the summer than typically are given, so they have time to iron out any potential problems with their schedules. Do you have a target date in mind for when those schedules will get released?
I don't at this time, and it may be that, I just don't have that information. With the transition to the North Carolina Student Information System, we won't have access to schedules until after the July 15th date. And so I don't have in front of me kind of what the timeline is after that, but I know it would be sometime in mid-July before our counselors even see the schedules in the new student information system. That's something that, at a future update, we would be, certainly happy to share. Next week, we'll be at a conference in Greensboro, many of us, concerning the North Carolina Student Information System and learning more and when we'll have access in those things. So I fully anticipate that we'll be able to answer some of those questions perhaps even before our next update to the full board or in our Student Success Committee. But I'll look into that to see if there's any additional information I'm just not aware of at this point.
Thank you guys for all and everybody, all the work that you've been doing. I know it's been a serious, heavy lift, and we truly appreciate it. I, as well, along with Meredith, was in a particular SIT meeting at one of the high schools, and I will say, as I said earlier, when I was thanking Dr. Buckram and Ms. Howard about their work with the SIT co-chairs, that I know it's easy to get lost in the weeds sometimes at a school improvement team meeting, and unfortunately, trying to answer some of those questions during that particular space, we were trying to let parents know that we'll be glad to provide information as we get it, and that students are not at a deficit at this point. In any other year, they wouldn't have already had all of this done yet either. So that it's just going to take a little bit of time. I appreciate you guys providing the information, and definitely with DPI expressing how CTE will be able to use flex time, because there was some major concern that CTE may be going away. So I truly appreciate you answering that question, because that was uplifted. I appreciate you expressing that the roundtables are going to be coming, because that was expressed. So the things that we're asking, you are answering, and I'm saying to you, thank you for that. And to just say that we as parents have to sometimes take a breath and say, it's not yet, but it's coming. And I get it. I'm excited and anxious and all of that about my student and what's going to be coming too, but it's going to take some time. And as far as the Durham Tech classes, I think that that's fully accessible, and that part is not new, and that's what we were expressing to some of the parents there as well. And I will say that for some years now, I will be completely transparent in saying that I have been clear to tell our district that I know that there's a sister district across the way that provides transportation, but I'm just saying that it does happen. But true. I mean, honestly, though, that's a wonderful thing. But I also know that Durham Tech has been very diligent about wanting to come into our buildings. And that's not new either. So in terms of with us having an administration here that's now open to that and willing to have that happen more, I think that's exciting, because we do have an administration and a cabinet and a board that's willing to look at that. So I think that will change things. So again, I say I'm very thankful, because from an equitable standpoint, that makes a huge difference, and that they are doing that in other districts already. So I say thank you very much, and I hope that this has given some of those parents a little bit of opportunity to excel and just be able to bring it down a little bit. Thanks.
Thank you, everyone who's here, who's been working on this, and everyone who's going to be part of this implementation. One thing that I really love is your first slide, and that's what I was like honing in on, is that we've got a lot of people in our district, in our high schools, who've already taught on block. And it makes me think about the equity conference I went to, where we had other teachers, other staff training and teaching their peers. And so I'm excited to hear that we're going to utilize people in our district who have taught on the block, some of them for many, many years. And they're going to share their experience with their peers. I think that's really, really great. I mean, that's some of the stuff, like with professional development, when you're thinking about staff, that enriches them too by teaching their peers what they know as well. So I think that's a really great technique, because hopefully that'll bring down some of the anxiety across the board of this is big and scary to no, I've done this, I'm your peer, I'm here to help you too, and I can share my experience as well. So I think that's great. I did have a question, just for my curiosity, that A Day, B Day with like Avid. So like if one person's on the A Day and Avid, is there going to be potentially, and if you haven't thought about this, let me know, is there going to be like another group of students who's doing their opposite day on Avid? So it's like they're swapping.
Yeah, so the reason we have flexibility with the high schools is basically like whoever that Avid instructor is, we're looking at that also being the like biology teacher.
Oh, okay.
So it'd be the same person. They would just like on Monday you would do biology, Tuesday would be Avid, and you would just rotate back and forth. And depending on who the Avid teachers are within the building, that's why there's flexibility within schools as to what they're going to be focusing.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, I was curious. Yeah.
Ronnie?
Yeah, thank you so much. And thank you, Dr. Hamlet, for bringing out the full group, because I'm just trying to imagine how you keep all of these details in your head, and I'm having trouble just following it as a listener. So thank you to all of you for everything you've done and continue to do. I have a question about the professional development and thinking about how we're engaging teachers to have engaging classrooms so kids aren't sitting for an hour or 90 minutes. Can you talk more about what that's going to look like and how we're going to kind of explicitly monitor that?
Yeah, so that's where those content blocks come in of really like dividing up. And so you have the 80-minute time period. It's not just, all right, we're going to teach about inequalities today or whatever the topic may be. It's actually going through is like, okay, for these 10 minutes, it's going to be individual work and they're going to be working on X. For the next 15 minutes, they're going to be small groups and they're going to be working on a different topic. And actually just taking each of those, and in all honesty, I will tell you, like a lot of that PD as a former principal in this district was done during all the time that we were online. We had these longer blocks of time. We had to break up the block, especially when everyone was on a computer. So we've had some experience with that already. But being able to really be explicit to say, okay, when you're actually lesson planning, what 5 different blocks are you going to use? And when we go through the different professional development models, they'll get 10, 12 different things you could use, and just they're going to have the time in the afternoon on February 10th to be able to go and say, okay, let's actually take some of our lesson plans that we have currently. If we were on a block, what would that look and feel like? Teachers will learn very quickly if they're just going to sit up there and talk. Like, kids will zone out. Like they know that right now in a 50-minute class. It's not gonna, be any different when an 80-minute class. So best teaching practices have to be emphasized. That's why we're going back to AVID. I mean, in all honesty, when we talk about best practices, AVID has all of them, and it's the same thing that other people sell and do and think. But if we're able to utilize those and say, okay, you actually have the time to do some philosophical shares at this point. You have time to do this piece. And just really going through the key to this is actually going through lesson planning. That's going to require our principals to be in classrooms, actually monitoring what's going on, looking at plans, having time for teachers to talk through challenges that they have. They're going to, those first couple of weeks are going to feel different. As I shared last time, not that it's a lot, but our teachers that have been here for a long time had about that much experience on the block. When we used to have delayed opens 10 years ago, when I was an assistant principal at Chapel Hill High, for those 2 days, we ran schedules on the block. You had 90-minute classes, and you saw one class every single day. So there's a little bit of experience for people that have been here a while. It might take a while to go back and think about that, but we had those delayed opens for years. So going back and utilizing those experiences, but it really is just going to be, getting into it, seeing what works, what doesn't, and us going back in the same stuff that we're going to talk about on February 10th and all this other rolling PD, coming back next year with it to help our teachers. Like, okay, now that you're here and you can actually see it and feel it, and you're going to implement this tomorrow, what do you want to see different? What are some strategies that are working? I think, again, going back to your peers, a lot of our teachers are going I've tried this out and it was great. And then other people I tried this out and it was horrible. And having those conversations, that's what a PLT does. That's those conversations that should happen. But it's going to take just some flexibility to try some new things. And knowing that what you did for 50 minutes, you just can't replicate twice. I think we're going to hear that over and over and over again. And once we get that down packed, I think we're going to actually see some really cool things happening. When we talk about, when I've talked with other districts about, implementation and what are they doing, I think about our flex block. I talked with an administrator yesterday who talked about when they were really purposeful with their flex block this past semester, they're finishing up their semester right now. They saw gains of, 10, 12% in their Math 1 scores. They did nothing more than just said, we're going to really focus on Math 1 during our flex block throughout the last couple of weeks, and they're very purposeful of it. That's going to be a time where it's not just flex and people are going to be walking the halls and doing whatever. We're going to be very purposeful with that. But again, it's a learning process. It's going to be a learning process for students, for teachers, for us. We just have to work together to make sure that we're doing what's best for kids.
Thank you. And just a quick follow-up. Can you talk about so I'm just hearing it sounds like there'll be opportunities for kids to move around in those 90 minutes, right? Like they're not going to be sitting. And then can you also talk about what gym and health kind of are going to look like in those 90-minute blocks? How are those going to look different than how they look today?
Yeah, so I mean, with that's going to be leaning on our peers in other districts to see what does that look and feel like. Knowing for the fact too, it's our freshmen that are taking those courses, not everyone. So we have to also be very mindful of movement for kids in classes. So like you said, we've got to provide little breaks in there. I can tell you as a teacher, if you're doing all of the work for 80 minutes, you're going to be exhausted after 3 of those periods. But if you've planned everything and you've got kids doing things and those type of things, then you're going to be fine. For the physical education classes and health, just like all the other classes, it's going to be how do we actually break this down? What are the standards that we taught and how are we going to navigate that as we go through? I will say just personally as a kid who has a kid on block, they're able to navigate that and they wake up in the morning, they know that they're going to have that, they go in, and it's a great way to start their day and get ready. And they're doing all sorts of things, the same things that we're doing in our classes. They're just able to break it up into different segments and navigate their daily classes.
I think this is my last question. I'm sorry. So I'm thinking about students who miss time in classrooms. So can you talk about how we are thinking about keeping them up to speed and not even, persistent absenteeism necessarily. Maybe it's you're an athlete and you're missing your last period class with some regularity. So how are we going to catch those kids up?
Yeah, I think, that goes back to at the school level, what classes are you being placed in at those points of the day? That's the strategic scheduling piece. I will say too, when you're missing class whether it's on a 7-period day or a block. Instead of missing 2 different periods, you're not missing one, but you're missing more of it. That is a trade-off when you do leave, and those types of things. But I think, knowing that if you're going to have a student that's going to miss 12 days over the course of the semester, working with the teacher, making, that teacher's going to know that you're going to be gone. They're going to have a plan and say, that's where the Google Classroom comes in, being able to catch up on those things. That's where flex time comes in. It may be, an opportunity where that student doesn't have that last period of the day during a season where they're engaged in a particular sport. That may, we'll see what that looks and feels like. I don't want to make that something if you're on a team, you don't have a last period. But we've got to navigate what that looks and feels like for our kids. I've always went back to the fact of it's still missing the same amount of time. We're not changing the day, the time that we're in school. We're just, instead of missing 2 different classes, you're missing 1, which may actually be beneficial to a student to focus on that one thing when they leave instead of 2 different things that they missed over 2 hours or whenever they're gone.
No. Okay. So did you say AVID is best practices for block? Did I hear you say that?
I just said AVID is best practices in
Okay.
general, not necessarily for block, but those best practices can be absolutely used in the block. And if you have longer times to be able to do things, you can do more of those AVID strategies.
I'm just interested because when I went to the AVID presentation at McDougall a while ago, I remember having parents say, "Why doesn't every kid get this?" Because every kid needs executive functioning help, and every kid needs to learn how to study for a test. I feel like people don't know how to do that anymore. So it'd be great if so. I don't know. I just want to say I'm excited to hear you say that. I was also wondering, are we not doing the skinny? Is that gone? Having blocks divided into 2.
So that was not it. Yeah, when we went through the process, that wasn't.
Okay. And then I guess just my last question is, I feel like when we were getting email from folks in the run-up to this, there were a lot of people who identified themselves as having ADHD, and seems like it was evenly split. Some people who were really excited about it and some people who were really nervous. And I'm just wondering what kind of conversations you're having with your EC folks, or how, just about particularly that group of kids.
Yeah, and I will say, for that group of kids in particular, it's really, to me, it's strategically scheduling them with a teacher that is engaging and isn't sitting there and lecturing for 80 minutes. I will say, you rarely ever have discipline issues in a class where kids are engaged. If kids are engaged in class and they're engaged in the work, they're too busy to do all the other things. As soon as you give them free time or you're just up there lecturing for the entire period, it gives them some freedom. That's also, one of the benefits of the block was we don't have all of those transitions where kids are in the hallway. Those disciplinary issues go down. So I think it very much goes back to like, who is your teacher? Are they, using those best practices? Are they keeping students engaged? Are they aware that a student may have ADHD within the classroom? I don't think, like you said, it was 50-50. And that's what we've heard in some of our feedback too is, for some, this may work, it may not. I think once we get in there, if a kid says that this isn't working, then that, as we're going into the next semester, that may be a modification. Like, okay, we need to make sure that they're in a classroom that I know is going to be extremely engaging. And that's where that strategic scheduling comes in. And when we talked about our registration meeting, like we're scheduling our UC kids, our 504 kids, our ML kids, like those are the kids that we schedule first to make sure they're getting into the spaces that they need to be in.
Can I just add on to that? The kids who have ADHD, for example, they're going to have a 504, and if they've been with us for a long time, they're going to have a 504 that has evolved over the years for what best suits their needs. And that's going to be given to the teachers as they start, and it's going to help the teachers, it's going to direct the teachers to what kind of best practices are going to be most helpful in the classroom. As it turns out, we know that those are best practices for most kids, but it's going to ensure, because we know that we're obligated to serve what's on this kid's 504, that it's going to help those teachers to make really good choices about how they split up that time. So.
Thank you. You want to come up and...
Dr. Trice and Dr. Bales, thank you both. Can't say enough about your work. And thank you to the secondary principals and the program leaders as well. We really appreciate it. You guys have done an amazing amount of work in a really short time. Thank you.